Hey, welcome to Prayers Radio. I'm your host, Rich Jarvis. This is my co host, John Waterhouse. This show is only about prayer. Ernest Holmes, which we call spiritual mind treatment in this philosophy. We have a very wonderful and exciting guest today, which I get the chance to introduce. Yay! His name is Jeff Schlicht. He is a RScP, which is a prayer practitioner at uh, Pacific Coast, which is over in Seal Beach, California. We've had one of the reverends on there on this show before. He's also a chaplain at the Global Center for Christ Consciousness. And let me give you their websites there. http pacificcsl.org. And for the Global Christ Consciousness Center, it's gccc.one. I suggest you check it out and do that. Would you mind praying us in, Jeff?
I don't mind at all. All right, let's just take a breath. That breath, that oxygen that we count on, that we take for granted, lives our bodies. Exhaling carbon dioxide, which doesn't serve us. We just breathe in that love and light that is God. Exhaling out of our mouths all that doesn't serve us, to clear our path, only calling it ease and grace. For there is that ethereal power and presence that is always in our life, for it is back of all life is life itself. That I just breathe that in, knowing that truth that God is my truth, our truth. And as we step into this prayer radio today, knowing that this time with Rich and John and each and every one of you, whatever time frame that you listen to this space is blessed. This time is blessed. Your forward moving steps are blessed. For all that is God, whether I name it peace or love or joy, harmony, any one of those is my essence, our essence, that we move in. And that principle that I always remember, that right where God is, I am. And it is that knowingness that this time unfolds absolutely perfectly, that we just rest, we surrender, we enjoy this hour and every hour after it. And together we just simply say, and so it is.
So it is. One
So,
of the
Jeff,
reasons.
I'm delighted that you're here with us today. It's a delight, and we're going to have a great time in this conversation. I would like to start with a very general question about your prayer practice.
Yes.
So, how do you use prayer, affirmative prayer, in your life? Do beginning of the day, end of the day, when you need it during the day? What's your practice?
Okay. What my practice has gone on, because it is a practice, it's like exercising a muscle, and the more you do it, the stronger you get. And so when I started, it was at certain times during the day. But I would have to say my walk in life is an ongoing conversation with God. And that's what I call prayer, is that we get to own it individually. And for me, it's understanding basic principles. And there are two. And that right where I am, God is. So I can talk to God every now and then, all day long. In fact, there are times in our day that, we have to have a little come to Jesus, sit down meeting with God. But the other principle is that there is the law that it does not take time off. So any thought, any word, any activity is always impressed into that law. So it's that mindfulness of waking up, awake and conscious, understanding these two principles are always at work in my day and all of our days. And starting with gratitude and carrying on that conversation all day long until I then go back to bed and end the day also in gratitude. Because gratitude for me, the smallest grain of something, even if I've had a challenging day or in a challenging situation, there's something to be grateful for. I don't care how big or small it is. But what I've noticed is that little tiny grain of sand, then another one pops up. And all of a sudden, I'm standing on an entire beach of gratitude, wonderfulness. So it's a gratitude of form that builds that bridge to the divine, So for me, it's a prayer all day, knowing that I can just, Emma Curtis Hopkins would say, pick a Wednesday and just a Wednesday afternoon and look up. I know that of my day all day long, that I can just step into prayer. So that exercise, that practice, um, it's just a conscious awareness as I go through my day. Yeah,
Brilliant. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Rich?
Well, the tangible results, what have you seen from that? I mean, the tangible results from prayer. A lot of people ask, well, I did the prayer, but it didn't work. And for you, what tangible results have you seen in prayer?
Okay, a whole bunch. And let me define what I've come to know as prayer, because I think those things, for me, they move. What I know because of my faith, prayer always works. I know that. It always works. What I have to surrender is what form it takes and when it shows up. Because in God, there is no time or space. And be patient. Prayer is always answered. I always explain it's not like going through a drive-through, where you talk to the clown, you give your order, you go to the next window and you pay for it. And then you go to the next window and you pick up exactly what you ordered. Prayer doesn't work that way. God is not a doer, so we're not beseeching. We're affirming what we already have. And it's that place that I come. And that phrase, heaven is upon us now. That core, that center it's always present. Now, can I get way over here? My God, yes. So many times. I think prayer at the end of the day is coming home, no matter how momentarily that might be. But it's like people praying for peace, let's say. Instead of changing an outwardly experience where all the pieces are moving, it's that coming home of that peace that is God that always lives within me. And when my perspective from that peace of God shifts and changes, it doesn't require the outside to make that shift, but my perspective has. And it quiets the noise of the world because I have come home. Now, demonstrations, which we call it in practitioner language, you know, I take a breath on that because people want, are we stepping into healing or are we stepping into fixing? And if I'm fixing, I'm controlling. And I've then missed the whole point of this co-creation of God. I remember one specific incident. When I moved here to Sedona, we'd visited, oh, I don't know, 10 years prior. And so we knew people and the storekeepers and knew our way around. So it made it easy for us. And the one called me up and she said, I'm sure you wouldn't want to come and work for us 3 days a week. And it was a place, they had a healing room. And I stayed within the basics of my training and what I know prayer and treatment is. And it was wonderful because people weren't coming in always looking for a rock. Rarely was that the case. They were coming in for more. And I was able to use 6 hours a day in anchoring in being a practitioner. And we had a healing room and we had sound healing and I did that and treatments and so forth. But I kept true to the principles of how I was taught. And a couple from Michigan, and this woman came up and she goes, we'd like to have a session with you. And I thought it was her. And she goes, no, no, it's my husband. And they were there, he terminal cancer. And I thought, oh my God, how am I going to do this? This was years ago. And for me to be genuine and authentic in my work, I need to be anchored that I am an integrity with how I present something. So our healing room was in the store next door. So I thought, well, I said, let me go check and make sure it's good because somebody could go in there and be messy. And I was having a conversation with God and I'm going, it just felt like so much responsibility. And going over there, I'm thinking, okay, give me the words, give me the words. And of course, the room was fine. So then I went back and I'm still having this conversation. And then I took the gentleman over there, knowing I had one more pass, going, okay, God, come on, give me the words. And before we went into the session, actually starting it, I'm thinking, what's always served you is truth. And what I had this man, I mean, this trip to Sedona was like that Make-A-Wish Foundation. It's your last time out. And I sat him down on the table and I went like this. I said, this is form and it's temporary and it has a shelf life. I need to talk about the elephant in the room. And from there, I spoke my truth. I was in integrity. I relaxed and we started the session. And my sessions were like 30-minute treatments because I kept to the principle and I spoke of his wholeness, among other things. But when we were complete, he sat up and cried like a baby. And basically, what I did was bring him home because the noise that was out here was the medical industry only focusing on the broken part. And he went off with a very changed perspective. And I thought, okay, God's got this. And in my mind, I do this, thinking when I release this prayer, my work is done. And just in humbleness and humility, I am just the vessel of this word. I am not doing anything, you know.
Mm.
But I'll have to say this. I was shocked a year and a half later that this couple walked back in. And he said, they came from Michigan. He goes, I came from Michigan to see you again. He goes, I went home and I went into remission.
Mm.
And now it's come back. And I said, come on, let's go talk. And I said, do you remember how I started the session a year and a half ago? I said, that hasn't changed. Now, what's on your mind? And it was, I'm going to miss my family and my grandkids. So we just went into a deeper conversation that, our forms don't live forever, no matter how that catches up to us. But our souls, they're eternal. And that missing or that preemptive grief is an earthly thing. It's within form. And I never saw him again, but those conversations, I'll never forget that, and the other demonstrations, I see them as maybe too general. It's not like the drive-through window where you're going to get that sack and exactly what you wanted was in it. But their life had shifted. Abundance had come into their life. And with the treatment itself, in Essential Earnest in the book, it talks about we can pray to here to tomorrow, but if you have the person that you're praying for is so closed up, you might start praying that there's becomes an openness. You come up from it at a different direction, and that has occurred. And when that has, it wasn't exactly what they ordered and what they got in the bag, but their perspective, and they came home within themselves. And those beliefs that we have here that we create and we have the opportunity to change. It's how we see and know the world. How I see and know the world is then how I move in the world. And if we can get just to the point to rest in God, have that peace, quiet the noise of the world, have that peace be a key to the freedom to open up other possibilities. And that freedom can even find that place of rest and surrender. My,
You find that? How do you find that grounded place within you to keep that? I mean, you're dealing with somebody who has cancer or some other type of uh, challenge, if you will. How do you
yeah,
find that grounding space within yourself to just see beyond what's going on with that? I mean, our audience, is all different types of folks, and they're like, well,
yeah.
does Jeff have the golden key on this? Which you sounds like you might.
No, I'm going to go back to the word practice.
Yeah.
Because okay, if you can remember so far back where you just come out of training and you're in that place after church where you were with the other practitioners and for the first time someone's coming to you, I was so nervous. So, but it's the repetitive practice on how the practice of being a practitioner fits within me. At the point that you start to stand into it and own it. You know, we talked a little bit about before we came live of, what we used to do before and so forth. And I manage private country clubs, fairly high end. And I a lot of high maintenance, and I swear to this day, it gave me great practice in learning how to pray. She's like, please let this pass. So where we came from started to give us these tools. And I remember the last time my husband got sick. That's why I left doing the store. And you know, um, he started having massive seizures, and to the point where um, they were epileptic seizures, but they don't just stop. I mean, the last one he had went for 24 hours to the point where he stops breathing. This was in December of 24, and they flew him down to Phoenix, intubated, and to a trauma hospital. And, I waited in the hallway, and they were coming to tell me that he wasn't swallowing, which was a sign of, brain death. And it was Christmas time, and the halls were all decorated. So I went into ICU finally about 5 hours later, because they were trying to stabilize him. And I went in, and I'm going, okay, you know, I should pray or something. I mean, this is what I do. And, I'm going to say a voice. I heard it clearly, knowing I know it wasn't audible, that said to me, stop. The prayer's already been said. I let alone. I relaxed. I set my bed up in the room and so forth. In fact, I think it was the second night the ER nurse, because they're always the same, or not ER, but ICU. And he goes, why aren't you all excited? You know, I'm upset. I said, do you want me to be? Would that help? And he goes, oh, no, 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 it's okay. And it's like, I never explained myself, but it was through the practice in that grounding, but in that moment that the prayer's been said, it's done. In fact, I took a picture of him intubated, and I mean, it's just really awful. And of course, they always have the big windows there. And there was actually a banner out there. And when I looked at the shot a number of months later, what I saw in the window was the word Christ, because the MAS was out of the picture, but it was him with Christ. And in that knowingness, I'm going, however this turns out, it's the right thing. So it's the practice of anchoring in prayer, finding my definition of how prayer works based on the principles of science of mind, but owning it and having it settle here, but also understanding the true definition of healing, that healing isn't fixed. And in that, for me, I find a place of surrender going, okay, it's pray and move your feet. And when you put those two together, where do you end up? And that's in your center. And now in your center, you're co-creating with God. And that's an anchor for me. But it took a long time, and I'm a work in progress. You know, if you practice, the muscle gets stronger. And I own my understanding of the principles and how they work. And totally anchor in my faith, because that's the fire of the prayer itself. That something will happen, that prayer will be answered. And I give up and surrender on how it does, what shows up, how it's answered. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Very
John,
well
you got the
said.
next question.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for those great stories and
Oh
your
yeah.
clarity around that. You serve as a chaplain these days, Jeff, and
Yeah.
which tells me that you're doing prayers for people who are struggling with some kind of issue. And thank you for doing that important work. What I want to ask you is one of those questions that comes up in the structure of doing affirmative prayer, and that's where Holmes says the practitioner treats the practitioner. In that work that you're doing,
Hmm.
what does that mean to you?
I have never sat in front of anyone where in the back of my mind go, are you kidding me, God? This is what I'm working on. So the practitioner treats the practitioner. I don't care what I'm doing, with a client, whether it's spiritual counseling or prayer and treatment. That prayer moves through me. And it's an opportunity of practice, but that practice is of a greater ownership of what prayer is, what healing is, and the practice of surrender and allowing those words to flow through me. And it kind of bounces off the client. And in that experience, I have a greater understanding of my relationship with God. Because for me, at the end of the day, that's what this is for me, is there's no beginning or ending in God. And I'm the essence of that. So therefore, there's no beginning or ending of the knowingness within me. So this practice of how it moves, the practitioner treats the practitioner, I grow in being of service and using prayer to other people. And it defines what prayer is and what healing is to me each time, each day. And having the flexibility of allowing that to move, to have a greater understanding, to move in the sense of growing. I always, my phrase for myself that I've created is I'm always becoming without a destination because I'm already home. And that home is with a capital H. But that learning and that practice, those are like the stones that Hansel and Gretel put down to lead me coming back home, and having the experience with other people to give me the richness and greater insight of my personal conversation with God. Yeah.
That goes into our next question. Your evolving prayers, how have they changed over time? I mean, we all come from a place of discovery, if you will, when
Yeah.
we're younger, and then we evolve our prayers over time. How have those changed over times to the present right now?
Okay. Um, right when you come out, you've got this structure, and I had a great teacher, great mentor, loved her. And I was in the steps until I had a friend, his name was James. And oh my gosh, he had so many illnesses, and he was a young man. He was 40. And I would go see him in the hospital as often as he was there. And he taught me my greatest lesson, in prayer, because he had cancer finally at the end. And I would pray for him at the end of every visit. And he would always fall asleep. So I was finishing my prayer and he had already fallen asleep. And I caught myself because I was wholeness and I stopped. And I'm thinking, this man's prayer is not to be fixed. He wants peace. So in the practice of developing my prayer work, it's listening closer to the underlying core, but stepping into the prayer. I don't know if swimming where you can feel real relaxed, if you're in water and it's lovely and it's warm, that's what prayer is. And when you can get to that relaxed place, and I'm going to call it channel, and just find the words without fixing, without the manipulation, but to understand that the words will come. And they always do. And so I've had many occasions to have experiences that have allowed my prayer work to expand, that conversation with God to expand to a greater understanding of how it fits within my understanding of principle, to be genuine and authentic, but to be in integrity. And then letting go and letting God, knowing that that's at work and I don't take on the responsibility. Yeah. So it's again, it's in practice. Yeah.
So we're at the 5 minute mark, and John, you got the next question.
Oh, goodness. Let's not run too quickly into this. I'm really enjoying your concepts here. Thank you, Jeff. I'm loving that you're so against fixing, and I absolutely agree with you because truly, if we're doing the work in spirit, there's nothing broken to fix. There is what
Right.
is, and if there's a different desire, then we move in that direction without making what's happening right now wrong. So I appreciate the way you do that. Um,
Thank you.
in your personal practice, when do you know that the outcome that you have stated is manifest?
Okay. I'm going to go back to where I was very, very young, earliest memory. And it wasn't the easiest environment that I grew up in. Probably not the worst either, but not the easiest. But what I truly knew that there was a greater presence and power than I was. And I had no words for it, but I knew it. And I've always, through whatever challenge, has always been cared for. But through my life growing up and through training and science of mind, I've been able to get a vocabulary to steal great phrases from lots of good people, and I put them in my toolbox. And when I'm done and I impress that word into the law, to me, I explain prayer like building a fire. You start with kindling. When you have that spark of causation, and then you put a little bigger log on. Yeah, I am. God is, I am. Now you get into the realization of a bigger log, and that's where the fire really starts to blaze. And when you get to releasing it, and after the gratitude, you're just in that glow of the warmth of that. But it's the knowingness that it will be answered. And it's when I release the prayer, I let go of it's a place what I've learned now of surrender, knowing it will be done and it will come in the form because when we have expectations or that control, that's when we are missing seeing the demonstration of the prayer. But if I'm open, if I'm at a place of surrender, I will know it here. And to get to that place of, okay, I'm ready to move into Thanksgiving and release, it's, I feel it. It's like, okay, you're there. It's like if you've always driven a stick shift, it's not here. It's an embodiment of knowing when, okay. So it's not having the form or fact. I don't keep records of demonstrations because I know it's going to be done. It's done. It's done.
I suppose that's when it manifests, is when you know it's done.
Yes, absolutely. It
Very
grows
nice.
from there. It's done.
That's
Yes.
great. Thank you.
How do you
Well,
how do you explain this philosophy to somebody that has no clue about this, about science of mind and Ernest Holmes' teachings? To somebody, just your elevator speech, if you will.
I was going to say this goes back to, the test on practitioners. What's your elevator speech? It's not a religion. It's a philosophy that's all encompassing. But the one element is it's God, and the rest of it is how it works. I one of my and I'm going to paraphrase and totally hack it, but one of my greatest Ernest Holmes quotes is there's only light. There's only light. The only darkness in the light is a shadow I cast. The work is how do I get out of my own way? That's the work that we have here. Course in Miracles talks about this place as an illusion, and people spiritually whitewash with that. But there's a reason that the collective has created this form that we live in. But again, form creates the work and then creates the bridge to the divine. It's how do we get out of our own way? How do we get out of our own way?
And as a final question from me, what would you like people to get out of this conversation we've had today? Anything in particular come to mind?
I think everybody needs to take a breath. We step into spirituality. I see it all the time, and it feels like some people's soapboxes are higher than others. Okay, let's get rid of all the pedestals. Let's get rid of all. It's unmeasurable. It's not, I need to be and no more. I need to do this. It is a personal experience. That conversation with God is yours. Own it. Unmeasurable against anybody else. And just talk. It's funny. A young man came from El Paso. He wanted to have a baptism. And for me, growing up Catholic, I knew what baptism meant. Cast out original sin. Well, of course, we don't believe that. There is no sin. It's a perspective of separation. But it's like, okay. But I met with his parents. He was 7 years old. His name was Oliver. He was the best. And on this Zoom meeting with his parents, I said, why do you want to be baptized? He goes, my mom reads stories and John the Baptist to me. And she said, yeah, we don't really have a church here in El Paso. We watch Unity of Houston, Michael Gott's church. And I said, oh, he's a good guy. And little Oliver asked, he goes, do you know God? And I said, yes. And he had round glasses like I do. And his eyes, I swear, got as big as this. And he goes, how do you know God? And I said, when you moved to El Paso, I said, how did you make friends? He goes, well, we just played. And I said, okay. And then what happened? He goes, oh, I got to know him better. I said, okay. I said, do you have a best friend out of all of them? He goes, yeah, his name's Jimmy. I said, how did you and Jimmy get to be best friends? Well, we played more and we have an understanding. I said, it's the same way with God. You just start out a conversation. Wherever you are, wherever you at, with no correctness whatsoever, just talk to God. And then continue that conversation, and it will grow. And you will have the greatest peace and understanding within yourself, no matter what's happening out into the world. That is your best friend. That's what I would like people to take from this.
Very nice.
That's awesome. Hey, they could find you at Pacific Coast Center, which is over in Seal Beach, which is pacificcoastcsl.org. Or again, you're over at Sedona, Arizona, the Global Center for Christ Consciousness at GCCC. That's 3Cs.1. And we're very grateful to have you on this show today because you bring a perspective that a lot of people want to hear about. That's great. Hey, I'm going to have John plug himself. Go ahead, my co-host.
For anyone that's interested, I actually do another podcast. It's called Higher Reality on the Edge of Understanding. And if you look that up on Substack or probably any of the podcast forums, you'll find that. And there's where we talk about spirituality and science and how they coexist and how they're now reinforcing one another. It's always a great conversation. I just completed my third book. It's called Spirits Awakening. It's available on Amazon, and it's spelled spirits with an apostrophe S, so it's possessive. And you can find me at those places, and you can always find me here with Rich, which is always fun.
On Prayers Radio, and we actually have all this information in the show notes so that go to YouTube, our friends at YouTube, check us out, support us, look us up, and try us out. Jeff, would you actually close us out with a prayer?
I'd be happy to. I'd be happy to. So together, all of us just take that collective breath again and just rest in that place where we talk to God. Sometimes I just think of it like a feather that is just slowly moving down, finding its center and resting in that place where it knows that it knows that it knows. For there is that one mind, one life, one God. That truth, that is my truth. That I give thanks for all of this knowledge, all of this wisdom within Rich and John to unfold all of these ideas one after the other. For it is that light itself that lives and breathes and moves in us and through them and through our ears that spark that understanding, that discussion, that light that is always present. For as we go our ways, that simple principle, that light, that truth, God is always with us, always for us. And as we co-create with God moving forward in our individual paths and collectively, for a prayer for one is a prayer for all, because we are all of that oneness that is God, that we go in peace, we go in love, and we have that infinite power propelling us forward only in truth. And it is in that knowingness that together we just simply say, and so it is.
So it is.
So it is.
Beautiful.
Again, thank you for joining us on Prayers Radio. Like, subscribe, or support us if you choose. And again, if you don't say a prayer, you ain't got a prayer. Everybody say bye.
Bye.
Your